The moon, a pale, livid scar against the bruised velvet of a spring sky, hung over Texarkana on the night of February 22nd, 1946, a silent witness to the beginning of a terror that would sear its name into the annals of American crime. The city, straddling the arbitrary line between Texas and Arkansas, was a place of shared identity and separate jurisdictions, a bureaucratic peculiarity that would soon become a hunting ground for a predator of such chilling anonymity he would be christened the Phantom Killer. The peace of that post-war era, a hard-won respite after the global conflagration, was about to be shattered, not by a foreign enemy, but by a homegrown evil that wore a simple white sack over its head. The first to feel the Phantom's breath were Jimmy Hollis, a 24-year-old tire shop manager, and his 19-year-old wife, Mary Jean Larry. They were parked on a secluded lover's lane off the Richmond Road, a common practice for young couples in the area, their car a private island in the dark sea of the Texas night. Around midnight, a blinding flashlight beam pierced their windshield, followed by the grim, commanding presence of a man. He wore a crude mask, a sack with eye holes pulled over his features, rendering him instantly, terrifyingly inhuman. He ordered Jimmy out of the car and with a cold, practiced cruelty, pistol-whipped him savagely about the head with a heavy automatic pistol, likely a .32 caliber, leaving him unconscious and bleeding in the dirt, believing him dead. He then turned his attention to Mary Jean. He dragged her from the vehicle, and when she attempted to flee, he chased her down. He tore at her clothes, but his assault was not explicitly sexual, it was an exercise in brutal domination. He struck her, and in a moment of bizarre sadistic violence, he sexually assaulted her with the barrel of his gun. Before vanishing back into the darkness from which he came, he uttered a single, cryptic warning. "Tell the police I'm the Phantom Killer." The words were a gauntlet thrown, a declaration of war on the very concept of safety. Jimmy survived, though with severe head injuries and no memory of the attack, while Mary Jean was left with physical and psychological wounds that would never fully heal. The police, initially skeptical of their story, had no idea this was merely a grim overture. For over a month, a tense, uneasy quiet descended upon Texarkana. The story of the masked man was an unsettling rumor, a dark tale whispered in diners and barbershops, but without a body, it lacked the grim currency of absolute truth. That changed on the night of March 24th, a Sunday. Richard Griffin, 29, a popular young man recently discharged from the Air Force, and his 17-year-old girlfriend, Polly Ann Moore, a vivacious and beautiful sophomore at Texas High School, were parked on a lane near the Spring Lake Park area. Their evening ended in a different lover's lane, but their fate was to be the same as the first couple's, only infinitely worse. They were found the next morning in Richard's 1941 Chevrolet Coupe, the windows fogged from the inside, a testament to the hours they had been there. Both had been shot in the back of the head with a .32 caliber pistol, execution style. Richard was slumped over the steering wheel. Polly was curled on the floorboards, a blanket partially covering her. The scene was one of cold, efficient murder. There was no evidence of a struggle, no robbery, no apparent motive beyond the act of killing itself. The connection to the February attack was immediate and terrifying. The lover's lane location, the masked assailant, the .32 caliber pistol. The Phantom had graduated from brutal assault to cold-blooded murder, and the whisper of fear in Texarkana became a deafening roar of panic. The city was now in the grip of a full-blown panic. The term Phantom Killer was splashed across the front pages of newspapers from Dallas to Little Rock. Police from both sides of the state line launched a massive manhunt, but they were chasing a ghost. The killer left no fingerprints, no witnesses, no useful clues. He moved with an uncanny knowledge of the back roads and rural lanes that spider-webbed the area. He struck without warning and vanished without a trace. Men began carrying guns and patrolling their neighborhoods. Women refused to go out after dark. Lovers' lanes, once the province of furtive teenage romance, were utterly abandoned. The very geography of courtship and community was rewritten by fear. And the Phantom was not done. On the night of April 13th, a Saturday, he struck again, and this time the horror was amplified by its sheer, intimate brutality. Virgil Starks, a 36-year-old farmer known for his quiet demeanor, was reading the newspaper in the living room of his small white frame house in the tiny community of Hope, Arkansas, about 30 miles north of Texarkana. His wife, Katie, was in the kitchen. Without warning, a figure appeared outside the window, raised a gun, and fired twice. One bullet struck Virgil in the head, killing him instantly as he sat in his chair. Katie, hearing the shots and the shattering glass, ran into the room, only to see the shadowy figure moving toward the front door. She fled out the back, but the killer fired at her through the wall, a .22 caliber bullet grazing her scalp. He then entered the house, stepping over Virgil's body, and stood for a moment in the living room before calmly walking out. The switch in weaponry, from the .32 used in the double murder to a .22 here, initially caused some confusion, but the shell casings found at the scene were from the same manufacturer as those found near the Griffin mortar. The killer was adaptable, confident, and willing to invade the very sanctity of the home. The Starks were not a young couple parked in a secluded spot. They were respectable, hard-working people in their own dwelling. The message was clear. No one was safe anywhere. The investigation, led by Texas Ranger Captain M.T. Lone Wolf Gonzalez, a legendary figure in Texas law enforcement, was immense and frustrating. Hundreds of suspects were questioned. Soldiers from nearby camps were scrutinized. A psychic was even brought in. The most promising lead came in the form of a suspect named Ewell Lee Swinney, a 29-year-old car thief and habitual criminal with a violent streak. Swinney's wife, Peggy, eventually told police that her husband had been the Phantom Killer. She provided chilling details that seemed to match the crimes, including the fact that he owned a .32 caliber pistol and had once come home with a pair of women's bloomers that may have belonged to Polly Ann Moore. Swinney was arrested, not for murder, but for car theft, a charge they could actually make stick. However, without a confession or physical evidence directly linking him to the murders, and with Peggy being an unreliable witness who later recanted parts of her story, prosecutors were never able to bring him to trial for the Phantom killings. Swinney was sentenced to life in prison for the car thefts and died in 1994, never having been officially convicted of the murders that defined his infamy. He remains the prime suspect, but the case against him is compelling, yet circumstantial. A tapestry of damning anecdote woven with threads of doubt. The terror, as suddenly as it began, ceased. After the Starks attack, the Phantom Killer vanished. The massive police presence, the armed citizens, the relentless media attention. Perhaps it became too hot, or perhaps he had achieved whatever dark psychological goal he had set for himself. The legend, however, did not die. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, as they came to be known, became a foundational piece of American folklore, inspiring the 1976 film The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which blended fact and fiction to terrifying effect. The case remains officially unsolved, an open wound on the collective memory of the Twin Cities. The Phantom Killer was more than a man. He was a specter of post-war anxiety, a manifestation of the evil that could lurk in the most familiar of places, a masked figure in the moonlight who stole the innocence of a community and proved that the most terrifying monsters are not those from another world, but the ones who walk silently among us, their faces and motives forever hidden in the shadows of history.